Hello and welcome to the My Ministry Mission podcast, where I'm taking you on a journey with me from unbeliever to disciple of Christ. As a Christian learning in the faith, I try to tackle challenging and difficult topics, and I want to share with you what I've discovered as I seek a position of ministry in my life. I'd love to hear from you, so join me online at myministrymission.com or find my social media links in the show notes. My name is Jason, and this is my mission. Hello and welcome to the My Ministry Mission podcast. My name is Jason McConnell and I am your host. Today's episode should be very interesting, and its inspiration was definitely unique. So I was driving down the road with my daughter in the car, and she asked me a peculiar question. She said, "Dad, what would you say to an atheist?" And this question took me by surprise. I honestly didn't have an answer because I kept considering what I might say, and I felt like it would fall into the void of an atheist's disbelief. Now, I told her, honestly, I don't know, but I wanted to think about it and come up with a better answer. So, of course, I had to turn this into an episode. I have to admit, though, this has been a very difficult topic for me because it required me to look at things from both sides of the argument in a way. Plus, there's so much competing information about atheism that it was hard to find some consistency. Now, it's no secret that I've only recently joined the ranks of Christianity, but prior to that, I was not an atheist or an anti-theist. At most, you could have called me agnostic. Plus, I actually started organizing this episode, and I kind of felt like God was telling me I was going down the wrong path. So you're actually listening to the second iteration of the topic and like the third attempt at recording it. So I hope you enjoy it. So I started this journey by asking other people in the faith the same question, and I got some varied answers, anything from quoting John 3:16 to just don't bother saying anything. And unfortunately, none of the answers I got were particularly helpful, which made me feel better. It turns out I'm not the only one who struggles with this question. So in this episode, I am going to tackle this topic of atheism, and hopefully I can provide a meaningful answer to my daughter's question, and maybe you too. Now, before we get into this episode, I do have a couple of shout-outs, so bear with me for just one moment. My first shout-out is for the recent high school graduates. Now, I realize that most of my listeners are not in the demographics of high school students, but I have a message for them anyways. First, I want to say congratulations to all the recent graduates out there. Summer is here, the school year has come to an end, and your high school graduates, you guys are now stepping out into the new world and a new season of your life. I remember walking out of my high school for the last time, looking around and realizing that my life was about to become drastically different. I spent 4 years trolling the halls of my school, taking for granted the level of security and comfort I felt as a high school student. Believe it or not, there is a grieving process, even for good things in our life, even for good transitions of our life. But here's the deal. You can and you will get a great deal of comfort from the Lord if you just ask for it. Your life is changing. God never changes. You're about to enter into a world that is far more complicated than you could ever imagine, and the enemy will be hard at work trying to get you to sacrifice your faith. Hold your Bible close to you. Read it every day. Pray constantly. And remember that you serve a joyful and loving God. Represent Christ as you move forward in life and be proud of your faith. It truly is a big world, but your God is so much bigger. Those of the world will be hard on you for what you believe, but remember what Jesus taught us in Matthew 5, verses 10 through 12. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way that they persecuted the prophets who were before you. When you are persecuted for your faith, and you still hold strong to that faith, God will be pleased with you and reward you with more than the world could ever offer. Stand strong and walk in the light of Jesus as you begin the rest of your life. Good luck, graduates, and God bless you. My next shout out is to all the dads out there. As of this episode, we're just 2 days away from Father's Day, so my second shout out, of course, is to the dads. Thank you for being there. We have a unique role as fathers. We are entrusted with the responsibility and gift of taking part in raising one of God's children as our own. Being a father is, in my opinion, the greatest blessing we could ever have in this world. And I hope you are savoring every joyful moment you can. My daughter's about to turn 13, and I love her so much. I am so proud of the young lady she's becoming, but I admit, there are times where I wish I could go back when she was an itty-bitty and spend more time with her again. They grow up fast, much faster than you expect. And one day, I know she'll be out on her own in the world. So if you're a dad out there on the front line, remember to really stress those Christian values, teach them to love God, teach them to love each other, and teach them to make the right choices when nobody's watching, because we know that God is always watching. So happy Father's Day to all you great dads. Thank you for being so patient. I wanted to shout out to the graduates. I wanted to shout out to the dads, and I apologize that it was such a long intro, but we're ready to get started. And I feel like the best place to start is to answer the question, what is atheism? But unfortunately, that proved to be difficult. My search started with the Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which suggests that atheism is polysemous, which is a fancy way of saying it has multiple meanings. Yeah, super helpful, right? One such meaning, though, is a simplification of it as the proposition that God does not exist. It's not the suspension of belief. It is a complete denial of the existence. It seems like some atheists, though, they do seem bothered by a definition that suggests they don't believe in God, because it imposes this monotheistic Christian-like perspective to it, and they don't like that. So they tend to suggest that atheists don't believe in any gods. Now, the American Atheist Association tells us that atheism is not an affirmation of belief that there is no God, just a simple rejection of the idea that there are any gods. The American Atheists emphasize this as well, but to distinguish themselves from atheistic religions like Taoism and some sects of Buddhism. So I decided to get a little bit closer to the source, and I looked up the word. The word atheism comes from the Greek word atheos, which means godless. And that's a combination of a and theos, where a means not or without. Therefore, at the most basic level, atheism is not theism or without theism, where theism is simply a belief in gods or a god. So you could say that an atheist is someone without God, which is a way of looking at this that speaks to us as Christians, don't you think? Now, there does seem to be a difference between atheist and anti-theist. Now, generally speaking, someone who is atheist is indifferent towards believers like you and me, where they deny the existence of God, but they don't seem to care if you and I believe. Whereas an anti-theist would be someone who denies the existence of God and then takes it that one step further by considering it harmful that others do. Harmful to the believer, harmful to society, to politics, to culture, and so on. Anti-theists believe that any theistic worldview should be countered, not just the Christian worldview. Now, this classification seems to indicate more of an activist mentality where they seek to drive others away from God as sort of a calling. And then just as a side note, someone who is agnostic holds the belief that the existence of God cannot be known for certain. Agnosticism is not really relevant to this particular episode, but I wanted to make sure I kind of threw that out there and explained it really quick. Now, what strikes me as interesting here is that the very core of atheism is disbelief, where many other religions, including Christianity, focus on what they do believe. Atheism is not a belief system for people who deny the existence of God or gods, but their views are still protected under religious freedoms. So that was kind of interesting to note. Now, for the purpose of this episode, I'm going to roll with the idea that an atheist is simply a person without God. That seems to be the most relevant, most digestible definition that I can come up with. One of the issues that kind of comes up surrounding atheism for Christians is the idea of morality. Now, the Bible is specific with regard to this if we look at Psalms 14:1. It reads, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, their deeds are vile, there is no one who does good." Now, understand the intent behind the word fool here is not to suggest that an atheist, or the atheist that David was referring to in that particular verse, was intellectually foolish, but rather morally foolish. It also stipulates that the fool says in his heart that there is no God. Now remember, Proverbs 4:23 teaches us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So in Psalms 14:1, David is teaching us that the result of denying God in our hearts is the risk of being led into corruption. So the question is, can an atheist have an objective morality without believing in the existence of God? We'll get to objective morality in just a moment, but a Pew research from 2019 found that 44% of Americans and 26% of Canadians think that a belief in God is necessary for a person to be moral. Now, a man named Thomas Stahl did a study in 2021 that was published in a research paper. It's got a very long name. It was called, take a deep breath here, The Amoral Atheist, a cross-national examination of cultural, motivational, and cognitive antecedents of disbelief and their implications for morality. Whew, that's a mouthful. Anyways, in this study, he found that atheists and Christians actually scored very high regarding protecting vulnerable individuals and treating people fairly as far as morality goes. But he also found that these two groups diverged in three specific categories. The first being authority, or more specifically, respecting authority figures. The second being loyalty, which is being loyal to one's group, and that could be like a country, a community, anything like that. And then the third was sanctity, which is avoiding degrading behavior like sexual promiscuity. Now, when we speak about morality, there are some considerations, and this is where I'm going to double back on that, on what I mentioned a moment ago. One of those considerations is the idea of this objective morality, or moral realism, as it is known to some ethicists. Objective morality is the idea that there is some moral truth which are independent of anyone's desire, belief, or subjective state about moral truths. Now, some examples of this might be murder or harming a child. And I think we all agree that those are immoral, bad behaviors. Now, Christians generally believe in objective morality because God established a specific set of moral laws. And these laws reflect God's character, his goodness, his righteousness, and his love. And we Christians also believe that we were created in God's image, and we have been gifted with the ability to make these moral decisions with his guidance. So we believe that the foundation of this morality is rooted in God's love, a love that seeks the highest good for others. So when it comes to atheists, is there a way for them to have objective morality? Without the belief in God, aren't they left with nothing more than materialistic worldviews? If that's the case, then we have an argument that there is no logical basis for an objective morality for atheists. Now, some atheist philosophers have admitted as much, saying that morality is just an illusion, without the presence of God or a God in their perspective. Yet others argue that there is a universal moral code to all humans, which is interesting. But if that's true, where did that come from? I'm going to answer that in just a moment. Now, understand, I'm not suggesting atheists can't have a moral compass that points to good, that they can't know right from wrong. But my concern regarding morality for an atheist is this. If someone's ideology is rooted in worldly views, when do they sacrifice morality for worldly gains? Now, I'm also not going to pretend or suggest that a Christian would never do such a thing. Sin is a part of us all. However, there is something to be said about knowing that God sees everything we do, and we ultimately answer to him. If an atheist commits a sin, where do they go for repentance? What higher authority holds an atheist accountable for their actions and their behaviors? I know I go. I know who I answer to. Now, I wanted to bring this up in consideration of my daughter's question, what would you say to an atheist? I wanted to consider how they make a moral decision, because I felt like that's an important part of understanding how to speak to an atheist or what to say to them. Unfortunately, I don't feel like I've really gained a lot of understanding on this topic. If anything, I have more questions than answers. And of course, when that happens, I turn to the Bible. And in this case, I think we find more clarity in Romans 2, verses 14 and 15. Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them and at other times defending them. I know that seems like a bit of a word salad, but Paul is teaching us that if anyone doesn't know of the law, its requirements are written on their hearts through their conscience. In short, the human moral experience is a part of God's revelation. Does this answer the question about this proposed built-in universal moral code? Maybe it does. But that's an answer that an atheist wouldn't have to reject. I mean, how ironic is it to go to the Bible to prove one of their points? Now, I think we can assume that the average atheist does have at least a foundation in morality that we can work from because God wrote it in their hearts, whether they like it or not. Now, as we become more sophisticated creatures, we focus on science and evidence, and we try to logic out things that may not have a logical explanation. Now, there is something called plausibility structure, and it's explained by a Christian thinker, Os Guinness, as the degree to which a belief or disbelief seems convincing is directly related to its plausibility structure. That is, the group or community that provides the social and psychological support for that belief. So what does this mean? Think of it like this. If we all go to church, any Christian there will wonder how anyone could possibly question the existence of God. It seems obvious that God is real and he is a part of our creation, of our lives. However, if you go to a secular university campus, for example, you'll find many skeptics who couldn't possibly understand why anyone would believe that God exists. It seems obvious to them that God isn't real. Over the course of the last 500 years or so, Western society's view of God has shifted from undeniable to unlikely, and our belief is heavily influenced by this plausibility structure of the culture we're embedded in. So one of my personal hang-ups about talking to an atheist about God is that we are embedded in very different plausibility structures on that subject. I'm not going to be convinced that atheism is the right worldview, and I doubt an atheist is going to be easily convinced that Christianity is the right worldview. I mean, at least not by me. We have to rely on God for that. But based upon this assumption, where would a conversation like this even begin? Once again, I go to the Bible for answers, and I'm taking us back to a verse I've discussed in previous episodes, 1 Corinthians 9, verses 19 through 23, where Paul writes, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I become like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I become like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I become like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I become weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save someone. I do this for the sake of the gospel, so that I may share in its blessings." If I want to reach an atheist, does that mean I have to become like an atheist? What would that even look like? Apostle Paul did not change his doctrine or his message to appeal to different groups. He merely changed his approach and his behavior. Look, he wasn't afraid to offend anyone over the gospel, but he wanted to make sure the gospel was the only thing that could have offended his audience. So how do we become like an atheist so that we can reach an atheist? And I'm going to touch on that in just a moment. But first, I want to make it clear that before I engage in a dialogue, I would like an answer to a question. A couple questions, actually. First, do you seek to discover the truth? And if so, what if it costs you your reputation and even your friends? Now, if the answer to this question, even philosophically, is yes, I have a few rules of engagement. Now, these are rules for me. Now, first, treat them with dignity and be willing to listen. We are called to love our neighbors. We are called to listen. Listening is an important tool. This takes me back to one of my favorite verses that I've used a few times already, James 1:19. "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Listening is important. We can center ourselves on others, on service, if we are quick to listen. Christ doesn't call us to love everyone but an atheist or to just love Christians. We are called to love everyone. And we're not called to just listen to Christians. We are called to listen to everyone. Listening is also how we will find out how to become like the atheist. If you listen, you might hear enough that you can meet him or her where they are and get things started. Now, there's probably no master equation to doing this, at least none that I know of. If you're going to have to listen to them, but also you have to listen to the Spirit to guide you. My second rule is to respect their intelligence. It's easy for both sides of this conversation to view the other as ridiculous, to openly mock or ridicule each other. Nobody likes to be ridiculed, and nobody likes to be talked down to. So when you exercise your listening skills, listen with genuine interest and consideration. Of course, I'm not asking you to believe what they say, but give them the courtesy of being heard. Just because someone has a different worldview doesn't mean they're dumb, and it certainly doesn't mean God won't use them to teach you something new. My third and final rule is this. Do not get into a heated debate. 2 Peter 3:14 reminds us of this. So, dear friends, since you are looking forward to this, make every effort to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with him. This teaches us that we are expected to walk godly in regards to our brothers and sisters, to basically walk in peace without any blame. The objective here should not be to win an argument. If you're in it for the win, then you're making the conversation about your ego. And the purpose should be to try to introduce the gospel. You and I must trust in God's timing. Maybe the person you speak to walks away still an atheist, but maybe you've done just enough that it set them on God's path towards redemption. You never know. I wish I could give you some bold and enlightened script that will somehow convince any atheist to join you in Christ. I can't. But I will tell you that in a generic sense, this is what I would say in answer to my daughter's question. Here it is. Dear atheist, I believe I know how you feel. I think I can understand your skepticism. I was once a non-believer, but now I am a disciple of Christ, and I'd like to tell you why. I reached a point in my life when I was no longer able to handle my own problems, no matter how much counseling I got, no matter how many antidepressants were prescribed, no matter how much I tried, no matter how hard I tried. I had to just reach beyond myself, and that started with me admitting that there was something beyond me. And through my search, I found myself looking to God. Unfortunately, I can't prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt, at least not where you are right now. But I do believe beyond a reasonable doubt because I have felt his presence and I have received his gift. I know the last thing you want to hear right now is Bible talk, but permit me to make this one point. Nicodemus met with Jesus in secret, and Jesus told him in John 3:8, "The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit." This is my proof. Now understand, I don't mean to prove God's existence to you with this verse, but rather I hope to share with you what I know as truth. I find comfort in putting my faith in a loving God, a God who is willing to sacrifice his only Son so that I can live on in the kingdom of heaven. I don't have to understand every aspect of God to know that he is love and that he is truth, just like the wind Jesus spoke of to Nicodemus. I hope you find as much comfort in your disbelief as I do in my belief, but if you ever want to talk more, I'll be happy to listen. But know this, I take Jesus' command to love each other as he loved us very seriously. You are my brother here on earth, and I care about you. I will not judge or scorn you for not believing. It's not my place. I will continue to pray for you, and I will continue to hope that you'll find your way to Christ. But if you don't, you are no less a person of value to me because of it, and you are no less a person of value to God. You just haven't accepted your place in his family yet. This is the answer to my daughter of what I would say to an atheist. I don't know if it's helpful to you or not. If I did have the opportunity to speak with an atheist, I would hope that the Spirit would guide my conversation. I'm not great at memorizing Bible verses and being able to counter their points like some evangelists are. So I'm left with just one option of speaking from my heart and hoping that the Holy Spirit fills it with the right words and the right intent. So join me again in a couple of weeks for my next episode. I'm going to tackle the topic of understanding the role of grace and salvation. If you have enjoyed this, I would love to hear your feedback. Any good stuff, any bad stuff, I'll take it all. Go to myministrymission.com, look up and to the right, you'll see contact me, click the button, fill out the form, and send me an email, send me some feedback. I promise I won't put you on a mailing list, I won't spam your inbox, I just want to know how I'm doing. You can find links to my social media in the show notes as well as on my website. Again, that's myministrymission.com. I hope to see you back here in 2 weeks for my next episode, but until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Thank you again for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or comments, I urge you to visit my website at myministrymission.com. You can click the contact button, or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/myministrymission. Remember to pray and remember to love God and each other. My name is Jason, and this is my mission.